This episode of the RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. AIM EC Herbicide powers up your spring burn-off with control of the tough weeds like kochia and cleavers. And because it's a Group 14 product, AIM EC Herbicide is the cornerstone of a solid resistance management program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on this January 9th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, it is Tuesdays with Lyndsey. It's back. Let's go. All right. So last night, if you missed it, the agronomist kickoff of the new season, the 2024 season, we decided it was time to focus on that puny little crop that no one talks about, corn. Just kidding. We know corn is king. I say that begrudgingly because it's not maybe my favorite, but I do like it more than soybeans. So there you go. But I had a great show. We talked a lot about building maximum yield, but really maintaining maximum yield because, of course, the hybrids that we have access to have phenomenal yield potential. It's all about getting it in the ground properly, and that takes patience. So we had Paul Sullivan on, Mark Foster, and Nicole Rasmussen were all on the show last night, and definitely talking about the patience required to make sure that you wait until that ground is fit to plant corn. You'll definitely see better results on the yield monitor if you take your time in the spring. And maybe that means waiting till May when the soil's a bit warmer and conditions are right. It's not always whoever is out first that wins in the yield race. And I did want to send a shout out to, of course, yes, my guest last night, but just in general, Eastern Ontario absolutely rocked it on the corn yield last year. So it looks like Eastern Ontario is going to end up on definitely above average, above the provincial average for corn yield. Sounds like provincial corn average right now is somewhere around 198 bushels per acre, and definitely hearing reports of 210, 215, even 218 and more for this area. And we certainly saw in the plots, which is one of the things we talked about here, just not far from where I live, west of Ottawa, in the corn trials there, we topped 300 bushels in a couple instances and definitely saw some very strong to mid 200s on the scale. So really exciting. It's always neat to see just how well a trial can do, sure, but real world averages, like farm averages of 210, 215 bushels per acre is pretty cool. Now, there was also some discussion after the show that I thought I would bring up because I think it's a really good one. So one of the things we really talked about was ROI, return on investment. And, you know, realistically, if you're chasing the highest yield, that's not always economic. So it really does come back to, do you need those extra 10 or 15 bushels, or does it cost you too much to get them? You really do have to look at where's your money best spent, and do you have to throw everything at a crop to get those gigantic yields? Maybe, but do you have to throw everything at a crop to get a profitable yield? Probably not, and that's actually the number that pays the bills. So I'll leave it there because today's show actually has nothing to do with corn. It has everything to do with the farm business, and transitioning the farm business to a new owner. And I just say new owner because I think in agriculture, we are so stuck that farms must stay in families because that's traditionally how it's been. It's often that there is someone in the farm family that wants to continue, and that's wonderful. But let's face it, it's not always the best move, and many farms have transitioned to a new generation, and really that maybe wasn't the best person. So we need to think about farm transition, yes, within families and family farms, which is most of them. But I challenge everyone to think about, realistically, maybe it's not a son or daughter that takes over the farm. Maybe it's a niece or nephew. Or, frankly, maybe it's the neighbor. Maybe it's someone you just met at the farm show, and 5 years from now, it all works that they are the person to continue the farm name, the farm legacy. So Realistically, though, all of that comes down to something that's very important, and we're going to talk about that here today. So it is Farm Transition Appreciation Day. We're going to talk about the importance of a plan, of having a plan, the importance of communication, the importance of transparency, some of those uncomfortable conversations, and also building a team around you to make a transition happen. Because realistically, like it or not, and I'm in my mid-40s, we'll call it, and I recognize that 65 is still a long ways off, but it's not. And let's make the most, yes, of our careers, but recognize that you can't take it with you. At some point, maybe you want to step back, maybe you want to spend some more time at the lake or spend some more time on a beach somewhere during the year or travel the world, and frankly, you've worked for it. So what does that mean? You need management, at least, to transition to a new generation, and maybe, yes, eventually, the assets are going to follow, but not always. So definitely a lot to talk about, and that's what we're going to do. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with a name you may recognize right after this.
It's time for today's Product Spotlight. Joining me now on the line is Barry Mann. He's with Genesis Fertilizers. So tell me, Barry, what is the Genesis Fertilizer Project?
It's a limited partnership with primarily farmer involvement, farmer ownership. And the project was formed to build out a Western Canadian fertilizer manufacturing and distribution system. So we're moving directly into the production of primarily urea, and then building out a system of distribution centers across Western Canada for obviously the storage and blending. So farmers are taking a stake directly in the plant based on the amount of fertilizer they use on their farm. They're going to own the equities in the company that represent those tons that they're using. The ownership is going to be the farmers. Those profits, those margins, which are, like I said, are some of the greatest in the industry, they're going to stay on the farm.
For farmers who are interested, where could they go for more information?
GenesisFertilizers.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147. This segment is brought to you by Alliance Seed. Every seed starts a story. It's about planning, hard work, problem solving. It ends with bushels, pride, and lasting memories. Make Alliance Seed part of your story. Learn more at alliancseed.com. All right, so here we are. You may know this gentleman joining me here on the show today. This is Shaun Haney, host of Real Ag Radio, except on Tuesdays when it's my show. Welcome here, Shaun.
Oh, it's great to be a guest.
Yeah. Now you can do, you can just go off on any tangent that you'd like.
Yeah.
And I have to try and rein you back in. It'll be great.
Perfect. Good luck.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. All right, so today, Farm Transition Appreciation Day, which, good heavens, glad we have such a day.
Didn't know.
Right? Yeah. It's like, International Coffee Day or like Buy Your Neighbor a Pet Day, but this one actually matters. So this is why we're devoting the entire show to it. One of the things I want to talk about before we dig into, we've got some really great data from the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index that actually I'm really excited to share and talk about, because we actually know a lot about what farmers are thinking, which is great. But one of the things I think, if anyone's been following along on social media, there's been several discussions about some of the hiccups, really, that people are faced with in this question of transitioning the farm business. And I feel like I haven't articulated some of my points very well. So I wanted to do some of that here. But Shaun, I'll ask you first, where do you think, when it comes to farm transition, where there are non-farming and farming siblings, where do we go wrong the most?
I would say simply we fall into the trap of not following the rule that fair is not equal and equal is not fair.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, and I think this was sort of in that thread of people discussing this topic. I think with the grand appreciation of land values, this has become much more difficult to sort this out. and I maybe there's one thing in terms of managing the process of the succession operations and ownership from, parents to the on-farm sibling, dealing fairly, not equally, but fairly with the off-farm siblings is, it's a whole other set of issues. I personally grew up in a family where that ended up being a disaster. I watched it in my dad's family. If you read the book on how it could go epically wrong, that they're in the Hall of Fame. And it was all about off-farm family versus on-farm family. And so, and we're going to get to some of the data, but communication is something that tends to, when it's not good, that makes it kind of snowballs and makes this whole issue even worse, I think.
Right. And so that was part of what the discussion was in exactly that. In, I think at the surface, many people say, well, of course, fair is not equal. Okay. There's going to be some people that don't agree with that. But I backed it up even a step further. And this is the part that I don't think I've articulated well, that I wanted to put out to our audience as well, is why do we expect, though, that it be at all equal? In my mind, I think that there is the emotional attachment to land, there's the legacy component, but if I'm running a particular business that requires certain assets to run it, I'm running that business, I need those assets, I have to make those assets pay for themselves. Is there another business where there would be people who are like, well, I also want the grocery store assets because,
yes.
Right?
I think so, yes.
I think there is.
Yeah.
But I think we need to back up a step in the conversation about equity and fairness, or being equitable and fair, is that it's not going to end up an equal share because there are components of the family that are not continuing to try and run a business.
Yeah, and I think if you think about it as the oldest generation, it is very difficult as a parent. You committed your life to running this family business and growing it and making it financially sustainable over the long term. And you have more kids than are interested in being a part of that family business long term. And you could be running the local hardware store, or you could be running your farm. It's the same considerations. The challenge is that you're doing that for your family, which is everybody. That's an inclusive word. Nobody says, I'm really doing this just for the child that's going to stay here. The other ones are really screwed.
Okay, but why does it have to be that though? So my point was the expectation.
Because here's why.
Yeah.
I'm not defending it. I'm saying this is how it happens.
No, yeah.
Traditionally in agriculture, everyone's wealth is wrapped up in that operation. People do not have a lot of other assets external of the farm that they can pass on or use as a piece of the succession to those off-farm children. Everything is reinvested. Everything is in that operation. It's in the land. It's not in commercial real estate or, making up stuff here. But yeah. I think that's the why of it, Lyndsey, and why it becomes very, very difficult for us to be able to deal with this issue, because all of the wealth's in one spot, and it's the farm.
Right. So my follow-up to that, because I get that, I understand it, and I know that certainly we have some phenomenal advisors and accountants and lawyers that work with families to set up things like life insurance policies or trusts or other things that account for other children, non-farming children. And when we say children, they could be in their 60s for crying out loud, right? We're not talking about kids.
Wait till I bring up the retirement ages. Yes, they are in their 60s.
Exactly. We're talking about potentially, adults or people nearing their own retirement. So, I mean, there are ways to account for the non-farming children, but there also, to me, I think needs to be from the early on, and maybe that's the part that maybe we're not talking about as much, is the expectation set out early on.
Oh, that 100%.
Right? That, this is not, I guess I use the example, and I mean, we farm now, but, my dad's retired. Like, at no point do I feel entitled in any way to any penny he has. Right? Now, he worked very hard for our family. He worked long hours, and when we were little, he worked 2-3 jobs. Like, he retired, he's done well. But like, why would I be entitled to a penny of his? I'm not. So, but in the farm, there is this expectation that the farm has built wealth, and we're talking big numbers, right? Because farmland values, right, have appreciated exponentially in the past, let's say even 20, 30 years, that we're talking, yes, big dollars. But there's also a sense of entitlement there. And why do we have the entitlement part? That's the question.
Well, it could be a generational thing. That's one. Two, I think it's easy to pick on the younger generation and be like, oh, those, kids nowadays so entitled. They think they would, because they grew up in this, better off from a wealth standpoint, and so there's some entitlement that goes with that. Many times I wonder if it's not the older generation that sets that sort of expectation. I know from our family's, my family example, I said that was in the Hall of Fame. That was exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. There was communicated. The expectation became that there was going to be this big pot of money for the off-farm kids. Yeah. They were adults. They were in their 50s and 60s. That expectation was set by the patriarch.
Right.
And so that can happen too. I think, if you think about all the succession advisors we talk to at Real Agriculture, they will all talk about how start early. And I think the earlier you start with this process, potentially you kind of knock some of that entitlement sort of down, because everybody's kind of in the loop when it comes to what the plan is going to be. It's when we start, when somebody, the younger generation is in their 60s. Well, of course, if you've never talked about this, it would be very easy to not even have a sense of entitlement, just have the wrong expectations, because heck, you know what happens on the farm? We just don't talk about money. Right? That's the last thing we talk about.
And I want to flip this the other way, exactly as you mentioned. At times, this is perpetrated by potentially the asset owner, the most senior of the generations, who perhaps in their mind, very much said, I want it to be equal. And I know this right now. I can think of two examples of people that I have spoken with, that the parent wants things to be equal at the expense of the ongoing farm.
Oh,
and that is just as big an issue, which is why I come back to this entitlement thing of, but if the person who owns the asset wants to divvy them up equally between their children, even at the expense of the ongoing business, I mean, that also exists. That is a very real and very difficult situation to navigate as well.
With the wrong intentions tied to that, it can be a disaster. And you can see how miscommunication happens, right? Yeah. You're an off-farm kid. You're working in downtown Saskatoon, or maybe you're in London, Ontario, and you see your sister or brother who stayed on the farm has been set up for life, right?
And you see it.
And
maybe not.
And hey, listen, you chose not to go back. But there can be some families are difficult. And so this is where the communication piece comes in to bridge all of these potential gaps and hard feelings. And the more time that exists in between dealing with some of these issues, the hard feelings build up and resentment, and oh boy.
But also I think, your point about, though the setting out those expectations early also gives time potentially. So let's say I'm the person who's going to take over the farm, and, my parent or whatever has decided everything's going to get divvied up. There's time to sit down and say, here's how you're going to leave this business. I'm going to be short of capital. I'm going to be short of working capital. Right? Like, there's time potentially to have that conversation. I don't know how good it would be to change minds, because minds don't change quickly, but at least you could have that conversation.
Yeah. And I think too, like, we talk about these things in like finite transitions. I'm not sure, but like they start and stop. Like, it's like all of a sudden mom and dad say, you know what, we're retiring. She's all yours. Management, ownership, boom. It's all on your plate, and they vanish. And I don't know why there's not more of a transition period where there is a mature way. We're talking big dollars now.
Yes.
When we look at the average farm size in Canada or the US, I'm not sure why there's not much more of a a mature transition like we would see in other situations. I think that's something else that has to be. Sometimes we tie too closely management transition and ownership transition as if they are exactly the same thing, and they are not.
It's sort of like the idea of, someone coming on as, say, CEO or chief operations or whatever, but doesn't necessarily become the majority shareholder all on the same day. Like there is a big difference, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. So let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back with some data that we have that is exactly on this topic, and we're going to talk about that. All right, let's do that. We're going to take a quick break, and Shaun and I will be back with more on this fascinating discussion right after this.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
As you look ahead to the next growing season, there's a lot to consider when it comes to your crop. You need every possible advantage available to you. The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to make the best choice for you and your farm. On-demand videos with leading industry experts, available anywhere, anytime. Go into the season confident and ready with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's strong portfolio of wheat, durum, barley, oats, peas, and rye, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy specific to your region.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this January 9th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and it is Farm Transition Appreciation Day. And this segment is brought to you by the Crossroads Crop Conference. Are you ready to revolutionize your farming practices and stay ahead in the ever-evolving world of agriculture? Join the Crossroads Crop Conference, January 29th to 31st at the Weston Calgary Airport. Register at crossroadscropconference.ca and get ready to examine big-picture innovation in agriculture. All right, we shift now to, Shaun's back here. And Shaun, we're going to talk now. We have a significant amount of data about farm transition, and so we're going to dig into it now. Remind me, this is from the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. How many people did we have answer, and when is this data from?
Oh, this is bad last spring.
Okay.
You got me on the number. Somewhere between 600 and 700 people would have answered this survey about farm transition. So yeah, it's basically spring of 22.
Okay. 23, you mean?
23. Oh yes. Right. We're in 24.
We're 24 now.
I'm still adjusting. I get a 30 days grace period.
Yeah, that's right. We all do. Although it is officially too late to say Happy New Year. Friday was the deadline.
Yes, absolutely.
Just so everyone.
I've given up already.
Okay, good. All right. Walk us through. We saw, some pretty interesting numbers for sure. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start on sort of the scope of the problem, like the average age of our farmers?
Yeah, well, let's actually talk. One of the things we asked them is at what age do you plan to retire from farming? Okay. Which I find kind of interesting.
Was there a I don't plan to? Did we let them?
I think that's the older than 75 group.
Okay.
And that's 26% of the sample.
Interesting. That's a lot.
Yeah, and people are working to older ages now. So, you can go to like Walmart, for example, and see a lot of people that you'd be like, oh, that person's definitely in their 70s, right? Like, so people are working older to later ages now. Trying to stay active, maybe they're dissatisfied with the boredom of retirement. Like there's lots of reasons why you work to an older age.
Yep. Between
65 and 70 was the largest population, which is 29%. Okay. What's interesting here is that only 4% said before the age of 60. So that I guess doesn't really I don't know. Does it surprise me, or that just sort of, I think that's maybe where we're a little bit different than the rest of the sample, like the general population. I will say this: the younger you were, the more likely you were to say a younger age with retirement. Okay, so that
makes sense to me though, because I used to think that people in their 40s were like nearing retirement. And then now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, oh, that's a long way off.
Yeah, so everybody has the dream of like Freedom 55, right? Yeah. And then there's reality.
You realize 55 is way too young, and you also recognize that you have bills to pay, and they probably won't be gone at 55.
Another interest, and I don't have a reason for this. Maybe you do. The Western Canadian farmer is much more interested in retiring earlier than the Eastern Canadian farmer.
Interesting.
And if we look at between the ages of 60 and 65, 24% of the people in the West said that's their ideal time to retire. In the East, that was only 9%.
Do we have similar business demographics as far as, like, these are mostly grain that answer this?
No, this is grain. And the grain would be about, for sure, half the sample, but it includes livestock too.
Yeah, okay. That would sort of feel like one of the bigger differences maybe when I think about perhaps Ontario and the West is, I don't know, perhaps people in the West, if you're a mainly grain operation, you're used to getting away now and again, maybe it just feels more possible, I don't know, to like actually step away from the business at a, typical retirement age. I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it.
36% of respondents from Eastern Canada said they plan to retire when they're older than 75. The West was only 18%.
Yeah, people in the East are much more stubborn. Let's put it that way.
Well, if I had to speculate this, I would have said it would be pretty even. We wouldn't see it. This is, sometimes we don't see a difference in some of the geography questions. This is one where I would expect it the same. Like,
and that's a stark difference.
Yeah, Ontario people think about Florida just like the Prairie people think about Arizona. But clearly there is a difference in terms of the expectations from an age perspective.
Okay.
Now,
all right.
Okay, so that's retirement. So let's talk about some of the succession stuff. So what we asked is, does your farm have a written transition succession plan? Now, the idea here is that if it should be written down, right? And I think the last census sort of identified this was, and Farm Management Canada has done some surveying where we have some work to do here. There's not as much written plans as probably we have, we would like to see it out there in the marketplace. Only 37% said they have a written plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Does your farm have a written transition succession plan? Only 37% said yes. 63% said no. Now, some of those could be in progress, but
or maybe they're very early in their farming career and don't feel that they're at that stage yet. We could probably overlay that data. Even still, that still only accounts for a portion of the respondents.
Yeah.
In which case, I think anything under 50% is a bit worrisome. Now, I would love to maybe ask the question, unrelated, but compare them, about having a written business plan. Like, I wonder, right, if in general we're just not great at writing things down, and so we're even worse at having transition plans, maybe? I don't know.
We have a difficulty in communicating, right? And so why would I need to write it down? It's all in my head, even though there's all these people around me and they're supposed to be able to read my mind. Because I think when I presented last week at the Ontario Ag Conference, the Farm Management Canada says 1 in 5 farmers have a written business plan.
Right. So this would be
better.
This would be lofty. This is right. So, yeesh.
When we asked farmers, are you working with any external advisors to help your farm through this transition? Because I think this is important, because any good group needs a moderator, right? Somebody a chair to steer you through these aren't all just rosy discussions. So you need somebody to make sure that everyone's getting an equal amount of talking time. Their concerns are heard. There's respect in the room, all those kind of things. 64% said they are. So
good.
I think that's pretty good too. And of course, if I remember correct, accountants were the number one person that people are working with. Yeah.
Which I think logically we often think about the accountant and the accounting side. But we also know that there are far more people that need to be involved. But at the very least, because sometimes I think, and I love accountants, and a good one is worth their weight in gold, sometimes I think we expect them to be miracle workers. An accountant is not necessarily someone who is completely up to date on all the tax questions that you might have. There may be a lawyer that needs to be involved for real estate, and there may need to be just a moderator on the family side, on the relationship side too. So I'm glad to know that many people have some, and that the accountant is maybe the go-to. But I think, and most farm accountants that I know will be very quick to say, let's bring in, I need to talk to this person on this, or let's bring in this person, or can you ask this person this, so that they work together, because it takes a team. It's not a one person thing.
We separated the sample by, are you the youngest on the youngest generation on the farm, the middle generation on the farm, or the oldest generation on the farm? When we looked at the barriers to farm succession, the older generation believes financial costs, tax considerations is the biggest barrier to getting your transition plan completed. The youngest generation, lack of communication. So differences in those generations. We looked at which of the following best describes where your farm is in the process of transition and ownership, or succession of ownership. Okay, so this is back to where we said there could be 38% are in the middle of the transition, 25% saying just getting started. It's actually a perfect bell curve, to be honest with you. We haven't started yet, 10%, and only 25% saying, hey, we're finished for the time being. So a lot in motion here.
Which maybe that's good. Like, let's hope that's because demographic wise, we know, and we know this from our Canadian census numbers and from the ag census, that our farming demographic is older than the average. So we do have to keep in mind that time doesn't stop here. So there always needs to be something in motion.
Approximately how many years will it be until your farm has fully completed the transition plan as it relates to ownership? 4 to 6 years, 27%, 7 to 9 years, 21%, 10 to 15 years, 22%, and more than 15 years, 10%. So 1 to 3 years was only 16%. So the transfer of the ownership assets, and remember, there's a difference between management transition and ownership transition. Ownership transition, we've got a number of years out. We're longer out. Yeah.
And again, exactly to that point, that's fine, right? In that realistically, the asset transfer is probably one of sort of the final steps in a transition, but so many things happen long before then.
And I kind of already mentioned this. The barriers to transition, the number one reason was tax implications. Number two reason was lack of communication. Number three was financial costs. So 2 of those 3 are tied to having the accountant involved, which ties to they are the leading external consultant that is assisting people. But I think it's a bit of a challenge to accountants.
Yes.
Make sure they're not just dealing with the numbers, but also be dealing with some of the softer stuff like communication, right? Lack of transparency between parties involved was one of the lowest, or the lowest. Now, what we also did, and I think we're probably running out of time here, Lyndsey, but
there we are.
Okay, what we also did was looked at the people that had completed their work and looked at what their goal was in terms of some of these criteria, and then what actually happened. Okay, so first of all, ensuring siblings on the farm are treated fairly. So people's goal was 4.43 out of 5. Their evaluation was 4.04. So you can see there's a bit of a gap there of about 0.4. Okay. The biggest gap is in open and transparent communication. It's a full 1 point. The second biggest gap, ensuring everyone knows their role in the process. So although the barriers are very financial, the biggest gaps are actually dealing with things like communication and clarity on roles and making sure, like, things, the softer things, that's where the gaps are. So it's kind of really fascinating stuff at work.
That actually, to me, that is, so 2 things. One, calling something, softer skills does not make it less important. Let's make that very true. It's the same thing with hard skills versus soft skills. Soft skills does not mean they're less valuable. They're just different and harder to learn, honestly. Let's be honest. And harder things to deal with. Also, I think I think that it's easier to sort of quantify in your brain the financial cost or the tax implications. It's harder to quantify, how much of a challenge is the communication, the transparency, the everyone being treated fairly. And so I like that the numbers sort of play that out in this, in that realistically we're not hitting the mark on the transparency, the communications, the roles, because they are the harder things to actually master, to get right. Like that's all there is to it. We are out of time. However, I do want to direct everybody to the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, because this is ongoing. This is a super cool thing that Real Agriculture is involved in. So Real Agri Studies is a partnership between us and Justin Funk with Agri Studies, and through Real Agri Studies, we put out surveys throughout the year, and we ask these questions and many, many more. And I highly recommend everyone head on over to RealAgriStudies.com. You can find past coverage of surveys that we've done, and also you can participate when these surveys come up.
We got the January ones out next week.
Yeah, and they take, Shaun, how long do they take? 4 or 5 minutes?
Oh,
maybe 6?
6 at the most.
So they're quick, but we get all sorts of really good data. So head on over there. Okay, Shaun Haney, thank you for joining me here on RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com.
I'll come back anytime.
Okay.
Honestly, farm succession, very, very important. Great job focusing on it for the whole show. It is. It's really, when we think about threats to our industry and this, the long-term survivability and sustainability of the family farm, management of the succession transition process. It's a threat. There's a lot of external, but the best part is this one's kind of in our control, much more than some of the other variables that we deal with. So let's do it. Let's do it better.
Let's do it better. Wise words there, Mr. Haney. Okay, we are going to go to a break, and then I will be back with Trevor MacLean. He's with MNP, and he's going to talk about, he's going to elaborate on some of the things that came up in this producer survey that we did on farm transition. More right after this.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Farm Command from Farmer's Edge. Like your own health, your crops need regular maintenance and frequent checkups to ensure optimal health. Farm Command from Farmer's Edge is your digital field assistant where you can track your applications and be notified of crop health changes. Visit farmersedge.ca/farmcommand to book a demo. All right, joining me now to tackle the, rather large topic, but super important topic of farm transition is Trevor MacLean. He's the national leader with the Transition Smart service line with MNP. Welcome to the show, Trevor.
Lyndsey, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and thanks for reaching out.
Well, it is a Farm Transition Appreciation Day, and with a title like yours, I feel like it was, destined. We had to have this conversation.
Well, thanks very much. It's a role that I absolutely love. I love agriculture at its truest roots, and I love, being an advisor to helping families through this very important step and stage and process, in their business and in their personal lives as well.
So I love that you called it a stage, a process, and steps, and we're going to tackle that in a little bit. In that this is a process, not an event, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. But let's back up just a little bit. why a Farm Appreciation Day or a Farm Transition Appreciation Day? Why is it so important as an industry that we focus on something like farm transition and give it a bit of, airtime?
Well, it's a great question and a great segue into, I guess, we really as agriculture have learned the importance of agriculture in the Canadian economy. Agriculture, for its part, is going to be the largest wealth transfer opportunity in Canada over the next decade. So I think giving it some spotlight as they're doing is very important, because I think it helps families recognize, wow, okay, we really do need to, pay attention to things. And, there's Peter Drucker, who is kind of the father of management, has always said that, what you focus on gets done.
I struggle with, and I think a lot of people do, but trying to think about, why is this such a difficult topic? Is it because of the thinking of this is an end of a business as opposed to thinking about, the legacy and the long-term viability of a business? Is it because it's about money and people are uncomfortable? It's a very Canadian thing to be uncomfortable talking about money. Is it all of those things? Why is this such a tough topic?
Yeah. Lyndsey, you hit the nail on the head. It's yes, 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 and yes. Yes, it's difficult to talk about because some people perceive it that this is how I am identified in the community. This is all I've ever done, and I never want to be not a part of it. So to that, successor, it's how do we keep the successor? If I'm taking over from my dad, how do I keep him involved and him have a, quote, relevant role in the business? Yes, it's talking about money. Yes, it's exposing dynamics. Yes, it's talking about wills. Yes, it's talking about, the finances of the person and the business. So it's all of those things. So when you do start talking about those things, you start to see that it's a deep topic, and talking about the hard, soft topics is not something that a lot of people in agriculture have been, taught or accepted that it's okay to talk about. So it is all of it. And when you start getting into it, you realize there's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of dynamics, and these things just need to be talked about.
Mm-hmm. Now, you used the word early on, you used the word process, a step, the stage. This is not we hope, and that's the whole point. This is what we're trying to avoid, is that it is an event that occurs that suddenly a farm needs to transition. We're trying to prepare for a long-term sort of process of this. So how should or how could a farm family or a farm business approach a timeline? Is 5 years enough? Is 10 years enough? If we have that long, is that a good enough timeline? Or how should we sort of aim to put these conversations together?
So let's start with your time frame. Is 5 years, 10 years enough? In most cases, Lyndsey, yes, that is enough. In all cases, is that enough? No. Every family is different. Every situation is different. But the one thing I'll suggest is that the sooner you start, the better. It doesn't matter if your kids are, 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old. What allows you to do when you start having the conversations about transition, it really sets up the business for ongoing continuity. And continuity really is just rolling over of plans based on who are the actors involved in the play at respective times. So you start to talk about, what does our finances need to look like? So again, you can start that conversation when your kids are 10 years old. When do we want to start retiring? So then you start looking at life insurance. You start looking at investments and RSPs and, different land holdings and where your business needs to go. So you start the conversations really early. And then as your kids progress or your employees progress in the business, the conversations just take on a different tone. And the mentorship or the coaching takes on different perspectives based on the timeline that you have available to you.
Can I just say I love this point of like starting these conversations early, in that obviously when your kids are 10 or 12, you're not sitting them down and saying, I would like to retire on this date 40 years in the future, right? But I think about growing up in a house where, at the dinner table we would talk about, investments or economics or thinking about career plans or, and that did start really early, but for the age that we were, so that, there was a conversation about these things. It doesn't have to be that decisions are being made. It's more that the more you talk about these things, the more comfortable those conversations can be, because they're normal then. They're your average.
You're absolutely, Lyndsey, correct. It's not about making decisions when your kids are 10 years old or 15 years old, but it's about allowing those conversations that are, quote, potentially uncomfortable, allow them to be comfortable because the family's exposed to it. You're surrounded by the conversations of, it's okay for mom and dad to talk about, hey, this is a tough year. These are some of the things we planned on doing, but unfortunately, because of the year and the circumstances, we're going to have to forego or postpone some of these other decisions. Mm-hmm. And those are the conversations that are very good for that next generation to hear and be surrounded by, so that when they come of age, it is not so difficult to broach those conversations and have them. Mm-hmm. Don't wait till your kids are 25 or 30 years old and the kids are just learning about, some of the financial circumstances around the farm, the business, or they don't understand, commodity trading. Mm-hmm. What are puts and options and calls and all of these things, introducing them to relationships that mom and dad have. Those relationships, I say, often take the longest to transition because, again, your parents have built those relationships they've had with their advisors over their lifetime, 20 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. So those relationships need time to transition as well. It's not just the skill sets required to run the business. Think about the relationships involved and the advisors involved in helping to run a business. Those things take time.
I think it probably looks different on a lot of farms, but I think one of the things that's probably common is that most people, I think, don't feel this is something they can do on their own, and many look to advice like people like yourself or mm-hmm. others. So how important, and I'm glad you brought up those relationships, how important is it to bring in a team of experts when when you're really getting down to, like you said, the decision-making part? Mm-hmm. How important is it to build that team?
It is critically important, Lyndsey. You never get things done. People don't win Stanley Cups with one player. If so, Edmonton and Connor McDavid would have several under their belt right now, but that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And the exact same thing can be said about, transitioning a business, in that it takes a team of people to support the business to transition. And again, every family circumstance is going to be different. So you may need, again, a financial planner that needs to come in and help, mom and dad looking at their financials to make sure they're comfortable with their position going into, quote, stepping back. Because a farmer never retires. A farmer simply steps back from their role. Are there going to be housing transitions that need to be accommodated through it? Where's that money going to come from, and what is it going to look like? Do you need a life insurance advisor to come into the play? Do you need investment advisors? Do you need lawyers? Do you need accountants? All of these people need to be part of your, quote, advisory circle and brought in at various times. But it's very important to keep them all abreast. And you need to have that one central advisor that'll say is your quarterback. And that quarterback's role is to help the family walk them through this process and bring in the advisors at the right time and stage to make sure that, again, this plan that is going to be rolled out and brought together is done so with full knowledge of all of the advisors, so that everything needs to line up. again, making sure that there's alignment with all of your advisors as well as the family is critically important. So, yeah, working with that, again, advisor to help quarterback the family in the process is very important.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry about Connor McDavid and the Oilers. We're going to leave it there. It's a great analogy, though. You know what, I am. And we've talked about it on this show before that I feel terrible because the man has aged so much in the years he's been in Edmonton because he has tried so hard to carry that team. And so there you go. But it's a great analogy. You can't just have one person and expect everything to happen. It really does take a team, and it takes the family working together. So Trevor, I really appreciate this. I hope people take your advice and start looking for someone to help them through this process and start the process with conversations. I really appreciate that, Trevor. Thanks so much.
Well, Lyndsey, thank you very much for the time today.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on January 9th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and thank you all for sticking with me through this show. We have tackled at least a part of the farm transition discussion. And I know that, many people are probably a little tired of hearing even the word succession. But realistically, anyone who is farming today is going to have to go through some form of a farm transition, whether that's selling and retiring, whether it's transitioning the farm to somebody else, whatever the case may be. If you farm, one day you won't. So what is that going to look like? Do you set someone up to continue to farm? Do you cash out and just enjoy your retirement? By the way, nothing wrong with that. There are so many different ways that this can go, but as Trevor says, as we talked about with the data, the sooner these conversations start, the sooner there is a plan, and that plan can change, but the sooner you start working on it, the better the outcomes. The better the outcomes on everyone's relationship with each other, on your finances, and frankly, nobody wants to pay more tax than they have to, so get planning, all right? If you've got feedback on today's show, give us a call on that feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. You can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. You can find us, of course, across social media at Real Agriculture. If you send us any DMs or reply there, Paige Holmquist is our social coordinator. She will get me all of that information as well. So there's never an excuse not to reach out. Would love to hear from you. Maybe you are in the midst of a farm transition and you're looking for maybe a shoulder to cry on or someone to share a high five, because let's be honest, sometimes this goes okay. And we do have examples. We have good news stories of multi-generational farms where people are working together towards a common goal. And that is a beautiful thing. The flip side of that, if you right now are someone in your 30s or your 40s and the going discussion is one day this will all be yours and you have nothing on paper, this is the sign that you have been looking for to get something on paper. Let me know how it goes. All right. I'll be back on the Issues Panel on Friday, but your regular host, Shaun Haney, will be back in tomorrow. We've got a busy month ahead, but we're very much looking forward to it. So thanks so much for joining us here on RealAg Radio. We'll talk to you again on Friday.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Whether applied with glyphosate or another labeled tank mix partner, fast-acting AIM EC Herbicide is the go-to tank mix product for the hottest burn-off of the toughest weeds. Start out clean this spring with AIM EC Herbicide.